I'm gonna be honest with you. I I don't want to make this video. I didn't. I dragged my feet. I come up with lots of reasons not to make it. But I feel like it's important to make it, and so I'm going to do it. And I'm doing it unscripted. You know, very few notes except for those that are in my mind. So you'll forgive me for that. But unfortunately, sadly, we have learned of the passing of Cindy Morgan, 1980s icon, Cindy Morgan. If you don't know the name, you certainly know her performances because she was the breakout star in Caddyshack, the absolutely captivating, beautiful, and talented performer in that film who, at the time, she didn't have experience in Hollywood. You know, she had been a weather girl. She had a weather woman. She had been a weather person. She'd been on radio, a lot of experience on radio. So suddenly she's appearing in this Hollywood film opposite these greats: Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, Ted Knight, Rodney Dangerfield, the largest comedic actors at the time that you could get. And she held her own. Not only held her own, she was a scene stealer, right? And there's a reason why that film, something that happened in that film, ultimately, according to Cindy, and history seems to bear this out, led to the slow demise of her film career. Well, precipitous demise of her film career, maybe the slower demise of her television career, but I'll explain that in just a moment. And then, of course, she would appear in Tron just a year or so after that, the breakthrough Disney film, technologically speaking. Again, just absolutely captivating, beautiful. Once again, playing a strong character. And by the way, these characters, that she played, these strong female characters at the beginning of the 1980s, would herald characters that we would see like this, throughout and later in the decade, but were, not all that common. And Cindy was particularly suited to take these roles on because she was like that in real life, beautiful, talented, strong-willed, opinionated, spoke her mind. And you'll learn about that. And I'm going to give you a very specific example about that in just a moment. But anyway, her passing is particularly upsetting because, well, look, anybody's death is upsetting, right? You don't have to know somebody to be upset by someone's passing because, if you're an empathetic person, you feel for their families and their friends, in this instance, her fans. But the first reason this is particularly sad to me is because when I started this podcast a few years ago, and the reason for the podcast was, believe it or not, at the time, there weren't that many 1980s pop culture podcasts. If there were, I probably wouldn't do the show. Now there's dozens of them. And part of the reason is probably people my age are now learning how to use the technology to create podcasts, post videos, and that sort of thing. But years ago, I created this show because I wanted to honor, I wanted to memorialize, I wanted to share the work that folks that I love from the 1980s with other folks. I wanted to document it in some way, show how their contributions continue to affect our media today. And as a fan of Cindy's and knowing a little bit about her personal history, she was someone I reached out to early on. Before I had many, if any, celebrity guests. I think I talked to maybe 2 other celebrities. And I talked to a lot of other folks, but as you do this, you sort of work your way, up to talking to celebrities. But not having a big track record of celebrity interviews at that time, Cindy said yes. And for that, I'm ever grateful because she, and again, among a handful of other folks that appeared on the show early on, opened the doors for me. I'm certain of that. But it also led to very honest conversations with Cindy before, during, and after my interview with her, which leads to the second reason, and that this is particularly upsetting to me, is that one of the things she shared with us is her feelings about an incident that happened on the Caddyshack set with producer Jon Peters. Now, this incident had been somewhat documented prior to this, but she had never really spoken at length about it. And quite honestly, when researching it, I thought she probably doesn't want to. She's not comfortable. It's not a comfortable, scenario that happened. But because our interview was happening in the shadow of the Me Too movement, I felt compelled to ask if I could approach the subject. And she kind of opened a little bit of a crack of a door into this conversation. And so, I took the opportunity, giving her every out. And she really opened up about how she believes that producer Jon Peters ruined her career. He threatened to ruin her career. Again, according to Cindy, I have to say that, right? And then he did. Because as you know, this woman who seemed poised to be a superstar throughout the 1980s, again, because of her skill on screen, which was just natural, just came naturally. It wasn't because she wasn't very experienced acting at the time. In her absolute knockout beauty, she was poised to be a superstar. But after Tron, she doesn't appear in, I don't know that she appears in any films. I don't have her, again, I'm talking off my cuff here. She does appear in many TV shows. I think altogether she may have 36 credits to her name, including those 2 big films that I mentioned. But her career is never what it should have been. And she cites Jon Peters. You should listen to. I'll post the clip of the interview where she talks about it. It's like 4.5 minutes. This section of it. But what pisses me off really is in all of the obituaries I've seen about her from the biggest publications, entertainment publications out there. Almost none of them even mention it, Jon Peters. And the one that I think it was Entertainment Weekly on their website. It's kind of a throwaway thing, and it's so in some regards, knowing how she felt about what happened, I feel like even after her passing, as part of honoring her memory, is to continue to remind people what happened to this woman. I think I even saw one publication, maybe it was TMZ, noting that, wow, she only had 37 credits to her name. That's curious, isn't it? It's not so curious if you know what happened, if you do the work. And her story is an important one because, as she said in our interview in 2020, this stuff is continuing to happen today. We know that, right? Folks abusing power in Hollywood. And anyway, and in short, for those, I'm not trying to bury the lead here as far as what happened. You probably know, but on the set of Caddyshack, she was first talked into doing nudity in a scene. And it wasn't something that was in her contract. It wasn't something that we talked about beforehand, but she agreed to do it. They had sort of, asked her to do it. I believe Harold Ramis had asked her to do it before they shot. Harold Ramis was directed the film. But on the day of shooting, Jon Peters, the producer, again, allegedly, but by all accounts, this is what happened. Many folks say this, right? He had a Playboy photographer there on set to take nude photos of Cindy. And he told her, this is what you're going to have to do. You're not only going to film this scene, but you're going to do a Playboy spread, Again, this new, beautiful actress. And she said no. And he said to her, I think the quote is, Jon Peters says, you're fucked for refusing this, And Cindy's agent sides with Jon Peters. And so she ultimately fires that agent because he says, hey, this is how it works, basically, Anyway, you could hear Cindy talk about it in her own words. But so let's not forget, Jon Peters was ultimately sued by 5 people for sexual, I don't want to say sexual assault. That sounds too strong. Certainly in one incident, I know it was sexual assault because the woman that sued him won. She won a $3.3 million lawsuit against him. And she, in that case, by the way, said he did very specific things, and they're all terrible. Then there was a handful of other folks who also filed suit, and those suits were ultimately dropped. It's believed that most, if not all of them, were settled out of court. Anyway, let's not forget what happened to Cindy Morgan, okay, when we honor her memory. But the final reason that this is particularly upsetting, and again, it's upsetting just to lose somebody, and I feel for her fans, her friends, her family, but is that the last few years of her life were challenges for her. And, I know a little bit about this from exchanges I had with her after our interview, and I know a lot more about this because she was very open about it on her social media. And in particular, at least from I'll get into a little bit of specifics that trouble me, but in particular, she had been struggling to find a peaceful place to live. So this is a woman in her 60s, trying to live in a peaceful place. And again, she didn't have her Hollywood career did not take off as it should have for the reasons I mentioned. But she was struggling to make ends meet, struggling to pay the rent, struggling to find a place that she could afford that was in a safe neighborhood somewhere. And she moved from one area of the country to Florida not too long ago. I think it was within the last couple of years. Again, the pandemic is sort of, erased 2 years of my memories from my mind. Seriously. So time is a little, soft and squishy. But I think it was in the last couple of years, she moved down to Florida, again, with the hopes of finding a place to live out the remainder of her years in peace. She was trying to get back to conventions, or try to get do more conventions and appearances because she loved her fans. And she and I, talked about that a little bit. And I did introduce her to some folks that I had hoped would help her to do that, make some appearances. But anyway, in the last couple of years, certainly in the last few months, I could say that for certain, she lived in Florida. And in the last few weeks leading up to her death, she was talking about how her landlord, and again, this is Cindy's perspective. I'm not looking for a lawsuit here, but the stuff that she posted on social media. And by the way, she shared some texts. So texts between her and some other folks. You could find them, I'm sure. I have them in case anybody complains about what I'm saying. I have the text. But texts between her and her landlord and other folks who were trying to get her to leave her apartment, the apartment that she lived in, rightfully so. And the things that she was describing that they were doing to get her to leave, I'm not an attorney in Florida, but in my state that I live in now are illegal. They're just straight up illegal. And Cindy was trying to find an attorney that she could afford or that would be friendly, maybe pro bono, that could help her fight these things. Because this, again, by all accounts, a wonderful woman was being forced out. And she was dealing with some folks who she, described as shady and otherwise nefarious. And again, allegedly, this is what she alleged. But in one text, post on Facebook, she suggested this one character was a drug dealer. And then later in that post says, if he sees that I've said this, I'm a dead woman or I'm a dead person. That's troubling to me. Last couple of weeks. Again, look, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, just to be clear, because again, I'm talking sort of, off the top of my head here. I'm not suggesting anything bad happened. The police ruled it, natural causes, but certainly in the very least, these are stresses on an older woman who's just trying to live her life. And in another text exchange that she shared with her and another individual, the individual says to her, if you keep texting my phone, you will regret it. So again, look, by all accounts, and certainly my experiences with this woman, a very pleasant, nice, wonderful woman. Direct, yes. Honest, yes. That was part of her charm and part of, I appreciate people that are like that. Don't beat around the bush. Don't give me flowery nonsense. Tell me what's really on your mind. But no one deserves to be treated that way, right? Certainly an older person just trying to, get through the remainder of their years. And she should have had many more years to live, as far as I know. Again, I don't, died of natural causes. Anyway, I thought so highly of Cindy because of her work in the 1980s. I thought even more of her after our conversation in 2020, where she was so generous to me. And again, just everything that I've learned about her since, just, a wonderful woman who deserved more. And my hope is now that she has peace. I'm certainly, she's found that peace now. But anyway, hey, folks, again, I didn't want to make this video, but I feel like I had to. I feel like, these people should just be, we should be able to think fondly of these folks and not, it just pissed me off how, again, woman who deserved a lot and didn't get as much as she deserved. Okay, folks, I will talk to you about something more uplifting and pleasant, I'm sure, at some time in the future. I will post that clip of Cindy in another video, though, and post the full interview elsewhere on some social media platform that's, better for longer videos. All right, guys, I will talk to you next time.